business. That famous phrase from Boris Johnson captured the at times frosty relationship between the private sector and politicians and exposed the tendency of the two to often pull in different directions. Businesses require a voice in Westminster. Companies need to have their message and demands reflected in policy, and often it falls to membership bodies to have the ear of top politicians and make that case for them. I'm Charlie Conchie, Chief City Reporter at City A.M, and today we are sitting down with Shevaun Haviland, the Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce, one of the country's top business bodies, to hear exactly what the BCC wants from Westminster in the run-up to an election and how it is engaging both sides. The BCC has just laid out a long list of demands to the Treasury ahead of the budget on March the 6th. We're going to be hearing from Shevaun on exactly what the BCC is asking for and some of the details behind those asks. So let's go and hear what she has to say. Well, Shevaun, thank you for coming in to City A.M Towers to join us on Bonds and Ballots. Great to have you in, thank you.
Pleasure.
I wondered if we could, this is obviously a series all about the relationship between business and Westminster. Just to look back on, you've been in the role for 2.5 years now, 2.5 fairly tumultuous years, probably
Some things have happened.
Yes. And just whether you could give us a sense of the mood of your membership at the moment. You obviously represent thousands of businesses around the country. Is there still as much negativity as there has been? Are we seeing some glimmers of positivity potentially creep back in?
So I joined 2.5 years ago, so May 21. If you remember, that was Boris's sunny up plans. We had a little bit more COVID to deal with in that Christmas and some big challenges for the hospitality industry. Rising inflation, of course, Ukrainian war, and like the energy bills were off the scale, and then, you know, a few prime ministers on the way. So it hasn't been the most straightforward of times for business, of course. What are we seeing? So we run the Quarterly Economic Survey. It's the UK's biggest private sector survey, about 6,000 businesses a quarter. So last quarter, so end of the calendar year, what do we see? We did see some uptick in confidence, so it's sentiment survey, so how people are feeling, which is a good sign. We have yet to see that being translated into investment intentions. So, and that's what we really need to see. We need to see business investing for the future. At the moment, they're feeling still, with inflation, energy prices, a tight labour market, margins are tight. So businesses are still a little bit in, I think, wait and see mode.
That's interesting. It's not being actually reflected in the data at the moment. So is this just the hope that we might see, inflation looks like it's staying fairly steady at the moment, maybe coming down, rates starting to come down. Is that just sort of hopefully looking ahead towards the rest of the year then?
Yeah, I think it is. I think businesses are on that side, they're hopeful because obviously inflation is going in the right direction, although static as of this morning. But it is the number one concern for businesses, and it's been the number one concern for 10 quarters in a row. And that's the first time it's been number one concern in 30 years. So it is, with interest rates a close second. So we absolutely want to see both of those going in the downward direction. At the same time, of course, we have a general election. I'm sure that has not passed by anyone's attention. And that adds a little bit more noise into the system. But economically, hopefully the indicators are looking positive.
It is an interesting one when you think of, you mentioned at the start, several prime ministers have passed in the time over the past 2.5 years. Do businesses, do you think they look at a general election coming down the track with some dread? Does that just mean more change, more uncertainty, more turmoil to come, do you think?
Look, it does mean more change, and businesses thrive when they have certainty and clarity. That helps you, businesses invest in a long-term view, probably longer than a political cycle for sure. So, clarity, certainty is the thing that businesses want to give them, the confidence to invest. We knew a general election was coming, we'll work around it.
In terms of how that actually affects your role as well, you've obviously, I can't even tally up how many in my head now, but we're coming into another one now. Does that affect and have a massive impact on the channels of communication between, a big business body like the British Chambers of Commerce and government? Have you always found there to be, over the past 2.5 years, a useful two-way dialogue there? Has it seemed shut at times when Westminster's feeling a bit more insular and inside itself? No. The government has always been very open to hearing businesses' views. Even Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng and
well, Kwasi, if you remember, was business secretary before he was chancellor. So he'd been hearing from me on a weekly basis until he got that gig. And of course, Rishi, before he was prime minister, was chancellor, and we used to see him regularly. So Westminster Whitehall definitely rightly open to hearing from business. We all have to remember that what we want is positive economic growth, and that's what government want too. And our view is it's crucial to work in really close partnership together. Businesses have been having a tricky time. Government, of course, have a very tight fiscal envelope, as it were. So the best way to get us back to economic growth is to work in a really close partnership.
And on partnership as well, you've obviously now this year got the dual sort of balancing act of courting, or discussing and engaging with the Labour Party as well as the government. Can you just talk to how has that engagement been with the Labour Party? Are you seeing those lines of communication perhaps a lot more open than they were, say, 4 years ago as well?
So we are an apolitical organisation. Our job is to talk to parties of all colour and make sure that the UK is the best place to start, grow and invest in a business. That's our job. So we continuously talk to both the government and the opposition. Clearly, as a general election looms, there is more activity, and Labour have done a lot of hard work in engaging with business and listening to business. We have been giving them the views of our members too along the way, just as we do with government, and it's important that everybody is listening.
And on the bigger picture of the voice of business in Westminster, bodies like the British Chambers of Commerce obviously have a big role in that, and it's been a slightly tumultuous year on that front as well. We had the scandal with the CBI. Has that been detrimental to all business voice in Westminster as well? Have you seen a knock-on impact of how that affects you, or are you very much, for lack of a better word, sort of seeing the benefits in terms of membership growth and so on, and a weightier voice when you're talking with government and the Labour Party?
So look, what happened around the CBI was terrible for everyone concerned, and obviously our first thought was always with those women involved, and my understanding is there's still investigations ongoing, so that should be the focus, and those people who lost their jobs along the way. At the same time, for those businesses that decided to part ways with the CBI, it's a crucial time for business to have representation. Business need their voices heard. We're very close to a general election, so and really it's important, whoever you are, CBI, BCC, for FSB, we all work together. It's important for business to have a choice of representation, and many businesses were members of their chambers and the CBI, so and the CBI seem to be making a comeback. So it's important that business have a voice, and the choice is theirs, I guess.
And on the voice, you've come out quite strongly today with your sort of list of calls to the Chancellor of what you'd like to see in the big spring budget coming up. And I think the term you used was a sustainable growth plan. You talked about a partnership between business and government. Can you actually just take us through the specifics there of what a sustainable growth plan actually means in policy terms? Yeah,
absolutely. So, I think we all collectively need to do a good job of explaining that thriving businesses and a strong economy mean more jobs. That means more taxes are paid into the Chancellor's coffers, and that means we can pay for teachers and nurses. So, the importance of a thriving, humming economy is clear. Government have had a hard time fiscally. Businesses have. We need to work in partnership to make sure that we're getting to that point together. So that was our. That's how we're thinking about going to talk to the Chancellor about the budget. We have 5 key asks in that. And the number one was around what our business is telling us, big issue they have on planning. Now, the Chancellor did some great stuff in the autumn statement. This takes it a step further, because what we're saying is we, business, want to build a fund, a £3 million fund, to help train more people to become planners, because it's a bit of a resource issue in local authorities that are short of people. So we want to train people to become planners, and we're asking government to ring fence funds for local authorities to employ those people in the local authorities for at least 2 years after they've been trained.
So, I mean, planning is an interesting one because I'm sure for many business people, it seems like running into that, slight sense of bureaucracy that is stopping them from doing things. And bringing the private sector in as a solution, is that a sign that it's maybe, not working in the public sector's hands? Does it need the private sector to step in and just get things moving slightly, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think what we saw is government acting in the autumn statement around ensuring that the processes that local authorities have put in place are more transparent and a bit speedier. But again, it's still a lack of resource. There's just not enough people to literally see these processes through. So our idea with government is to say, how can we help that? It's not just all about business knocking on the door of government and saying, you need to do this and this. It is up to us to step in and work in partnership together. And
there's two interesting points as well I wanted to just touch on within the submission. One being the relationship with the EU, and perhaps a slightly interconnected point, I'll let you tell me otherwise if so, but on skills as well. I think the point on EU, you're saying, you've told the Chancellor that we do want to see a closer relationship with the EU. I think, you point to some of the impact that your members have suffered as a result of, trading breakdowns, tougher customs rules to navigate. How bad, looking back 4 years now from us leaving the EU, how bad has that impact actually been on businesses around the country?
Yeah. So we obviously knew it was going to be difficult at the beginning, a whole new set of rules, but we thought the businesses, once they'd implement those, would sort of get used to it. But actually that hasn't happened. So in our TCA 3 years on document that we publish every December the 23rd, which, ruins Christmas, we did some more research. 60% of businesses told us that they're still having challenges with the rules. And 80% told us that they don't know what rules changes are coming, in the future. And we know that we have import rules coming in last month in April. So still a huge amount of uncertainty. The EU is our biggest trading partner. So 42% of our trade goes to the EU. It is crucial that we start making some of this easier for business. Trade is, if you think about it, we are one country trading with the rest of the world and the EU, that's a whole other size of market, right? Only 10% of UK businesses export. That's too low a number. 60% of chamber members export. We are very good at helping people do it, but we need to work with government to get past some of those challenges. The Windsor framework has really sort of, I think, helped the tone a great deal in dealing with the EU. I was over there in November meeting some of the commissioners, and I think there's some political will. Of course, they have elections this year too. So yeah, we want to see a bit more political will to make some changes, sort of practical, realistic changes that will help smooth that transition.
On the political will so far, there has been some positive noise, some acknowledgement that this can't go on, the status quo can't continue there.
Yeah, and we want to see more of that. And we have suggested to government and the opposition a number of sort of practical steps they can put in around improving particularly food and drink paperwork. So at the moment, if you send a hamper to the EU, you have to have a different piece of paperwork for every item in that hamper. I mean, that's a lot of work and probably doesn't make it worth your while sending it. So food and drink products, for example, on mobility, on professional qualifications, those are some of the things that we hope we can move things on with the EU.
And then just coming on to the skills point as well, that's a sort of challenge facing every business from the city to Scotland at the moment.
Yeah.
So many businesses. I think in your survey that you've just done, it was 3/4 of businesses struggling to hire at the moment and have vacancies. What is the actual short-term fix there? Because obviously we can look at training, skills, those feel like multi-year projects. Is there anything that can be done in the short term? What are the fixes in general that we can look at on the skills front?
Yeah. I mean, it is the number one thing that businesses talk about. It's so challenging. And again, it is stopping them expanding where they want to. In the very short term, so there are about 2.5 million people who are economically inactive, long-term sick. We need to work hand in glove with the government to help get people back to work who want to come back to work. And that's going to take some time, and there's some great stuff out there in terms of getting people back to work around boot camps. We need to do more of that. We also need to, I think, look at our immigration system. So I think that's what you were talking about, referencing perhaps earlier. We have a net immigration of 700,000 people, but yet we still have nearly 1 million open headcount. So that would suggest that maybe those two things are not working as well as they might together.
So more skills-based immigration system?
So a lot of that number is students, right? And so obviously they're not necessarily part of the workforce. But we have the shortage occupation list in place. We have the Migratory Advisory Committee. We want them to look at the economy and say, OK, what do we need in our economy? And therefore, what sort of immigration do we need to match that?
When, those numbers there on the vacancies, when you hear sometimes the tone of the debate when that 750,000 is sort of slapped there as a completely indisputable negative, do you find that frustrating? Is that, sometimes the practicalities of business getting lost in just, politicking? Does that annoy you slightly? Does it annoy your members? Do you sense some frustration there?
I think there's a conversation we all need to be having as a nation that's a little bit more nuanced than 750,000, that's bad. Because like a large number of that is students. There are visas in there that we have given, rightly so, to Ukrainians, to the Afghanis, to those in Hong Kong. So that's the majority of those numbers. And that is all sort of agreed immigration. The question then is, how are we helping our economy with immigration? Because at the moment, it clearly isn't working, and we need to have that conversation.
And just finally, I know you're and the Chamber are very vocal champions of sort of green investment and what the future holds for the green economy in the UK. Are you let down slightly to see a softening on both sides, Labour and the Conservatives at the moment, on some of those green investment plans? Would you like to see a bit more, financial and emotional backing to those almost?
So, look, the climate challenge is a huge global issue. Without the planet, there is no profit. We need to get this right. And for business, it's sort of two sides. So on one hand, how are we helping our businesses to get to net zero? And that means energy efficiency, which means hopefully they'll be saving money. On the other side, there are huge opportunities for UK PLC and new green products and services in innovating this space. I mean, we were world leaders in offshore wind fairly recently. Contracts for Difference was a great policy framework to help drive that market. What are we doing in that space to make that happen? So we would like to see the green economy, green transition at the centre of all parties' plans, because it's the economy of the future.
And just finally, as we zoom out a bit, we in the city can probably be criticised for this, in the same way as Westminster sometimes, of being slightly too centric, not thinking around the country enough. What are the exciting developments? What are the things that you see in your network that sometimes pique your interest and say we should be looking at this? This is an area of the future.
Yeah, great question. So the best bit of the job is travelling around the country, meeting businesses from Inverness to Penzance. And despite businesses laying out the challenges that they're having, rightly so, invariably they turn around and say, but you know what, Shevaun, I'm growing this part of my business over here, I'm launching a new product, or I'm hiring people here. I mean, they are innovators, can-do, solution-orientated people, and that is what we need to be bottling and turbocharging. And that's what I say to the city is, as a country, we have huge assets around, our universities, we're innovators, we're entrepreneurs, and of course the city of London as a financial centre. How are we using that all together to drive our economy across the country?
Shevaun, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
There you have it. There are some of the asks of the British Chambers of Commerce to government and to the Chancellor in the run-up to the budget on March the 6th, and indeed the election at the end of this year. Skills, trade, closer ties with the EU, all high on the agenda there. What do you make of those calls from the BCC? Let us know in the comments below, and hit subscribe here to stay up to date with all the latest videos.